Welcome to the Incomplete Skeptic, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Sober Wise Guy series. Generally, I interview old timers that are 30 years sober or longer. Some are in recovery from alcoholism, some are in recovery from drugs, some are in recovery from both, actually, probably most. To some extent in sobriety, I've noticed through the years that old timers can be somewhat marginalized. I think people sometimes assume they don't need positive reinforcement. They're sober a long time, or that they have big egos and should be summarily dismissed as less important than newcomers in recovery. AA ain't a contest, man. And honesty and listening can be equally engaged upon by newcomers, old timers. And I've seen people that were sober a long time that don't listen as well as a newcomer. So, but it's not a contest. And newcomers are probably the lifeblood of the body, metaphorically speaking. Maybe old timers could be viewed as the backbone, but Creator God is a spirit of recovery, and that one has all power. Take what you like and leave the rest. The objective of Sober Wise Guy generally is to share experience, strength, and hope to the still suffering addict or alcoholic, and to inform the public about what a recovered life looks like. And we have one of those lives here today in the form of Charly Rose Niesen. She is an author, a speaker, and she will be talking about a book that she's in titled Becoming an Unstoppable Woman, Entrepreneur. 26 powerhouse industry leading women share their stories in this book. And I've read her story, I've studied up on it, and she is amazing. Welcome to the Incomplete Skeptic Sober Wise Guy series. Charly, how's that for a long lead in?
That was perfect.
All right. Welcome aboard. Appreciate you coming on to be a guest on Sober Wise Guy.
Thank you.
So I want to turn it over to you. I don't want to make it all about me, but I'll ask questions maybe along the way as you tell your story. But maybe we could just start with what you were like, what happened, what you're like now. So, what's your sober date?
So my sober date is February 12th, 2005. I was pretty young when I got sober. I was 24. But a lot happened with the time that I started using to when I got sober. As many probably know, as you talk about addiction and hardship, I started using when I was probably about 12, 13 years old. I started by drinking. I grew up in an addict family. So my dad was an addict, and I realized in like sixth grade that my family was a little bit different than other people's. Not everybody went to visit their dad at treatment. We lived in Little Falls, which was 30 minutes from Brainerd, and my mom tried to make it as normal as possible. She would, pack a picnic, we'd go to family groups, we'd go visit my dad, and I was not able to go hang out with a friend, and I told her I was going to see my father in treatment again. And she looked at me like she saw an alien. It was like all of a sudden this weird, like, well, I don't know if my mom's going to let you come over anymore. And I was like, did I do something? Did I say something? My mom was a nurse. And I realized at that moment, as I talked to my mom about it, our family was a little bit different. And so we were in family group at Aurora here in Brainerd at the state hospital visiting my father. And his counselor said, Charly, you have a lot of your dad in you. And I thought, well, this is great. I couldn't ask for more. My dad's funny. Everyone likes him. I was his namesake. His name's Charles Chuck, so this was really exciting to me. But I realized what he meant, that there was some addict behavior, and I would probably be somebody that was going to struggle with addiction. At age 16, I started really trying to find my place in the chaos. And so I started running away, skipping school, stealing cars, just trying to get some attention. And even though it was negative attention, it was still attention. From age 16 to 18, I was in and out of foster homes, treatment, different boot camp, a girls' boot camp for 90 days. I was in St. Croix Girls Boot Camp. And as I was going through like these juvenile detention centers, treatments, I was a star student. I did great. And I realized there was that structure. There was boundaries, something I didn't know as a child. And so when they were put in place, I thrived and I did very well. And I was, going back to court, and the judge would hear how wonderful I did. I would get out and I'd fall apart. And so I went, and the last time I went was CMRDC. I was 17. I had met a man named Dustin. Dustin and I ended up dating, and I ran away from the foster home I was at from Grand Rapids. And I got picked up and brought back to CMRDC. And I found out I was pregnant with my first child.
Question for you.
Yes.
Where did you meet Dustin? How did you come into contact with him while you were in treatment?
So Dustin and I actually met at the Juvenile Detention Center before I went to the boot camp. And we exchanged phone numbers. And then I had a girl that I met there that we became really good friends. And she kind of kept, bringing us back together. Like, well, Dustin's wondering how you are. And so then when I got to Grand Rapids, I ran away from there and ended up coming back to Brainerd and staying with Dustin. And that's when I got picked up as a runaway, and then brought back to CMRDC. And he went to the annex because we both had warrants out. And I was at CMRDC for about 3 weeks, and that's when I found out I was expecting. And I didn't have to go very far to tell him, because there was like a courtyard where it was like juvenile and then adult jail. And I told him through a window, like, hey, we're having a baby. And so
Wow.
I was there till my 18th birthday. Actually, a day after. My birthday is December 31st. And they wanted to make sure there was no temptation to go out and party. I was 6 months pregnant at this time when I got out. So I spent about 7.5 months at the Juvenile Detention Center because I was a very high run risk. And I got out on January 1st, 2000. And I moved in with Dustin, and I went back to school, was preparing. I had this idea of this perfect family. And all that fell apart about a month before I had my son, Zachary. Dustin was cheating on me, and he left me at his parents' house. I gave birth to our son on July 19th, 2000, and moved into my own apartment, was doing very well. I mean, I was sad because Dustin left me, but I was still a really good parent. Dustin didn't really meet his son until Zachary was about 3 weeks old, and he asked if he could come up and see us. And I said, I guess. So he came up, and that is the first time that I was introduced to meth, was from Dustin. He guaranteed me it would help me lose weight, because he had left me because I put on quite a bit of weight. I mean, I was pregnant, having a baby. And I did lose the weight. I lost the weight. I lost my housing. And I even lost my will to parent. The one thing that I promised I would be so wonderful and I would do everything, all that changed in a matter of using. Like the first time I used, I hated it. It burned my nose. But then all of a sudden, within 20 minutes, it was like this false happiness of like, oh, everything's going to be okay. And I had all the energy like he promised. And I was, feeling on top of the world. But then my parenting started really struggling. Dustin got a domestic up at my apartment. The police were called. I lost my apartment. I became homeless, and there was nobody around to help me.
Was the domestic with you or?
Yep.
Oh, okay, just being
so
sure.
he came up and was wanting me, because like I said, he introduced me to using, but then he wanted me to sober up because he needed me to be a better parent. And he was very angry that I continued to use.
That's ironic.
Addiction, what do they say? Powerful, cunning, and baffling.
Right on. You know, just a quick thought that came to my mind, and I brought this up in mad speeches and the like through the years. There's a statistic out there about the number one killer of children that die in drunk driving tragedies. And ironically, the number one killer is the ones that love them the most. It's their parent. They're driving under the influence, right? And when, you know, people sell their freedom for a drink or a drug all the time, and people don't understand how serious it is once these things get into our system, and it's all the rules change, you know. We start believing lies, and when we hear the truth, we think it's a lie, and when we hear a lie, we think it's the truth. And it's like there was a speaker I heard one time that referred to it as a disease of perception. And yeah, so just thought I'd add that into the conversation here.
That's interesting. I mean, to hear that the parent, I mean, because you're right, your intention is never to put your children in harm's way, but so often it happens with this disease.
So what happened after the domestic?
So my landlord came up and he told me that I had a week to move out of the apartment. And this isn't the first time, like there was people coming and going. There was my apartment and 2 other apartments that were just open doors, people coming, going, using. And so he was cleaning house, which I understand now. And my parents, so my dad never got sober. So my parents were going through a divorce at this time. And I begged my mom, you know, if she could take Zachary until I got on my feet. And she just couldn't. She herself didn't know where she was going to go. And so I contacted Zachary's grandmother, which was Dustin's mom, and asked her to take Zachary until I could get on my feet. I didn't think it would take a little over 6 years to get on my feet.
Yeah, that was an astounding part of your story. It's like addiction has a different timeline than our best intentions, you know.
Yeah.
So what did those 6 years, I don't know, where did they go, or I don't know what details you want to go into with that, because I know the story of recovery was more powerful than the story of addiction. But I also know that lessons never rise above their teachers, you know, generally speaking, just like a story doesn't rise above the audience unless they've surrendered their consciousness, you know, to creator. And then we have like miraculous spiritual awakenings, you know. I mean, I'll put it another way. I had hundreds in my life, hundreds and hundreds of spiritual experiences, but I didn't know that they were spiritual experiences, you know, until I had a spiritual awakening. So, you know, and it's just funny how some among us wake up so easily, and then others, I mean, your story and my story are actually quite a bit alike in a lot of ways. I never got pregnant. That's one big difference, but you know, but you know, I could have a cactus that would die of thirst if I was drinking, you know, so, and much less trying to water a relationship while I'm drinking. Yeah, not going to happen, you know?
Right.
So where do you want to go with the story now?
So I found myself homeless. I had a bag of stuff. My other stuff, my mom came and got what she could, and I lost everything else that was in my apartment. And I just was standing on the street corner and Front Street of Brainerd, and I was bawling. It was like, how did this happen? I went from, about a month ago having this, work, like loved parenting. That's all going back to school, bettering myself, creating something for my child and myself, to now I'm homeless. And I met a group of people that were going to go to Arizona, and they offered me to go with them to Arizona. So I'm a very impulse person, and I moved to Arizona, and I was there for about 3 months. And I was using there and just not doing well. And a friend back home from Brainerd reached out and said, Charly, I will pay for your bus ticket. You need to come back here. And so I agreed to come back. I moved in with my friend Jennifer Toll, and we both decided to get sober together. Jen had struggled with addiction. I struggled with addiction. She had custody of her son, and the one requirement when I came back was that I remain sober and work towards getting my son Zachary back. Our intentions were really good. We managed to stay sober for about a couple months, and then we both got jobs at the state hospital, and we got our first paycheck, which was a nice paycheck, and we ended up going out and using together. And we were partying, having people come in and go. I met a man named Kyle. Kyle was super nice when I first met him, just, understood that I, was working towards getting my son back, acted very supportive. And Kyle and I ended up starting a romantic relationship. And I ended up getting pregnant very soon into the relationship, within probably 3 or 4 months. Kyle and I, the second that I knew I was pregnant, I ended up getting sober, and I always stayed sober through my pregnancies. Kyle started working. I got my own apartment. I was on probation because part of my story that I left out, there was just, when there's using, I was stealing. There was a lot of theft that took place while my using. And so I was on felony probation. And so I had a probation officer that was very invested. She would come over. She wanted to make sure things were going well. Kyle and I were doing very well. We were both, working, creating a safe space, excited for the arrival of our baby. Just got a bigger apartment, and things were going really well. And I gave birth to my second son, Dane. And we went home, had the baby room all set up. I took time off work. Kyle remained to work because he didn't want to not have that income, with rent and everything and the new baby. And Dane was probably like 2 or 3 weeks old. And my dad stopped over to visit, and he was going to meet his grandson. And my dad came with his friend, and they stopped over and, talking and holding the baby and everything. And he said, "Oh, holy crap, Charly, you put on a lot of weight." And I said, "Well, Dad, I just had a baby." "Well, I got something that will, give you a little bit of energy." And at first, instantly, I was like, absolutely not. Like, this is everything that I've worked to not do. And no more did I go into the kitchen. And I thought about it, and I thought, well, as long as I don't go back to IV use, and if I just snort it or just smoke it, and it's just this little bit of time until I just lose the baby weight, I should be okay. So I used, and Kyle came home, and he was upset at first. And then he was like, "Well, if you're using, then I'm going to use too. So we were all getting high. The baby was there. Within a matter of 3 days, I'd been up 3 days. I was IV use. I was using heroin. I was using meth. I was actually passed out in the porch with a needle in my arm when social services showed up and the police department, because my probation officer was getting ready to take me off of probation early. And so when I didn't come to court, she thought that was really weird. So she came over to do a welfare check, and she found me passed out with a needle in my arm. Kyle, my boyfriend, Mr. Wonderful, jumped out the window, ran around the house, and I heard him say, "Whatever you find in the house is hers. The apartment's in her name."
They say in the Friends of, you know what the Friends of Lois program is?
Mm-mm.
Lois W. was Bill W.'s wife, and she started another program. And they told me when I sat down in a meeting that my picker was broken. I could pick them. I thought it was kind of funny, right?
Yeah, no, I think all of our pickers are broken.
Right. Anyway.
So I ended up going to jail, and I needed to. I ended up going to jail. I was there for 5 days. That's when I found out that I had a child protection case. I knew what child protection was. You know, you hear it all the time, and people that I hung out with, it was like, oh, child protection, CHIPS case. But it's different when you get one. And it was very shameful. I sat in jail, and I felt very ashamed. And I went to court, and I had my handcuffs, shackles, bright orange suit, you know, walking into the courthouse or the courtroom, looking around. It was full of people, you know, just for their own stuff or just to be there for other people. And they're talking about what this was. And I just remember them saying like all these words, and this was my options. And it was like my head was spinning, because here I am, barely 6 days sober, and finding out that I no longer have the right to see my child when I want to, you know. And so I had to do a parental evaluation. And so I went from the jail, Crow Wing County Jail. They had me walk across the street in my bright orange outfit and handcuffs to meet this doctor. And I went from having like 0 diagnosis to 21 diagnosis by the time I got my result. And so it was like, to me, I went in there and my thought was, okay, I have to, you know, show that I'm, you know, happy, and I have a good outlook on things, like things can get better. And when I did that, one of my diagnoses was narcissistic, and I had to look it up, because I'm like, this guy's a doctor. I hate myself. I put paper over the mirror because I don't want to see the person staring back. And I can't even stand myself. Like, I'm too afraid to live, but I'm too afraid to take my own life, but I'm too afraid to live as well. I just went through motions, and I thought, if this guy's a doctor, I don't think he's a very good one. And I said that in court, and I probably shouldn't have, but I agreed after being in jail for about 36 days that I would go to Liberalis treatment and get long-term treatment to hopefully help me get some of the skills and the trauma that had taken place, so that I could heal and be the parent that my children needed.
Yeah, never believe a story that doesn't empower you. I get that. Yet at the same time, these obstacles are just things that actually are stepping stones to a better life, although it sure as heck doesn't feel like it at the time. I totally get that part where you said you hated yourself. And I think I was in recovery 8 years before I quit hating myself, and my sponsor gave me an exercise to do for 8 years. Look in the mirror and say, Timothy, I love you. Say it out loud, look yourself in the eye, and point at yourself when you say it first thing in the morning. And the first day I sit at Charly, the very next morning I did it because I respected her,
Yeah.
and she had forgiven the guy that drove drunk and killed her son, gave him a hug in the courtroom, and says, "I love you and I forgive you for killing my son." And it's like, okay, this is talk about unstoppable,
Right.
And she said, when someone wants to get well, no one has a right to get in their way, and you can't be an obstacle. And so she said, am I going to walk the walk, or am I going to just talk the talk? We talk about forgiveness in the program, and she happened to be a Christian, and both disciplines teach forgiveness. And she felt like she had to forgive, regardless of the temperature of her heart. I mean, it's one of the hardest moments of her life, so that whole thing. And when she said, I told her I wanted to quit speaking because after I speak, I want to commit suicide, and this is getting worse. And you reminded me of that when you talked about that piece of your story. And sorry, I'm going on a bit here, but she had said, do the mirror therapy. And the next morning when I tried it, I looked in the mirror and I pointed at myself in the mirror and I said, Timothy, I love you. And I spent the next, I don't know how long, cussing myself out and calling myself every name you could think of. And, that's how I really felt about myself. And I didn't know. Yeah, it's like I picked a scab that was a deep wound, and I started speaking from my woundedness, and I was bleeding all over myself. And what stopped me from delusion, when you have a deluge of things that is pouring out toward myself, vomiting all these feelings on myself, if you will, I stopped when I saw myself as someone else. And I thought, if I saw a human being talking to someone the way I was just talking to myself, I'd stop them. I'd try to help. It's like, oh my God, don't talk to someone that way. And I just did it to myself, and so I spent like the next 8 years every morning looking myself in the mirror saying, Timothy, I love you, before I believed it, and she said, just keep doing it until you believe it. Obviously you're in a better place now, but on that continuum, you're in the courtroom. You said the doctor's crazy, and basically in so many words, I told the prison psychologist that he told me it's a foregone conclusion that Timothy Cameron will spend the rest of his life in prison, and I thought, you're nuts, but you can always tell an alcoholic, you just can't tell them much, so sometimes I wonder if they don't tell us these things to make us fight. I don't know. But anyway, sorry to interject, kind of a long story, but it seemed to be apropos to the moment. So what happens after that?
So I go to Liberalis, and I leave jail, I go in front of a judge, Judge Zimmerman, and I said, I'm going to lose my place where I live. Once again, I was being evicted. I said, I will have nowhere to go. So for me to go to treatment and focus on treatment, I can't focus on treatment unless I have a place. And my probation officer said, absolutely not. She goes straight from jail. She goes right to treatment. There's no stops in between. She doesn't even stop at a gas station on the way to treatment. And then he looked over at the prosecuting attorney, and the attorney said, nope. And I looked at my attorney, and he was like, I don't know, I'm not fighting against these guys. Mm-hmm. And he looks me in the eyes and he says, Miss Dryling, because that was my name at the time. He said, I'm giving you one chance and one chance only. Don't make me regret this. And so I got out of jail. I had, I think, 72 hours to get all my stuff packed, to get everything moved, to get everything ready, to meet with my social worker, to have a visit with my son before I went up to treatment. And I did it. I think as addicts, alcoholics, we work really well under pressure. Really, it's like, okay, well, what? If I would have gotten 17 days, I probably would have waited until the last 12 hours,
Right. Right. Yeah.
And so I went home from jail, caught Kyle cheating on me with our upstairs neighbor lady.
Lovely.
Very lovely. And I was like bawling, and already my life felt like it was completely unmanageable. I was a mess. And I packed everything up and I told myself, like, I am done. Like, Kyle's out of my life. I'm done. I wish it would have been that simple. And so I find a place, I meet with this landlord, and she says to me, do you believe in God? And I said, I mean, I was raised Catholic, so I do. I said, I don't have the best relationship. He's let me down. And she said, I don't think he's let you down. I think you've let yourself down. And I said, okay. And she said, will you pray with me? And I was like, I need to find a place. I don't really have time to sit and pray with you right now. So unless you're giving me a place, I have to keep working. And then I realized, I stopped, and it was like, of course I have time to pray. So I prayed with her. And we prayed, and I shared some things with her, and she's crying and I'm crying. And she said, I'll get back to you in a couple days to let you know if you got the place. And I was like, a couple days? I don't really have a couple days, but doesn't matter. Like, we just had this moment. So I left, and no more than about 6 minutes later, she let me know that I got the house. I moved in, got all my stuff. She told me one of the requirements was just me to live there. I promised that. I went to treatment. I was there for about a month, didn't hear from Kyle, didn't hear anything from him, asked how the baby was, nothing. And he called me finally and said, I want to get well. I have nowhere to go. Can I please stay at the house? I promise that it will just be me. It'll give me a chance to get into treatment. And I was like, no. And I was talking to my counselor about it. And then I made a decision that, okay, maybe if he stayed there, he could get sober. And so I did my program. Kyle stayed there. He watched the house. I came home for Christmas for a vacation, or not a vacation, but a pass. I came home for a pass because I was going to get visitation with my son and spend Christmas with my family, is what I told treatment. Really, I was coming home for the visitation and to spend time with Kyle and for us to have Christmas with his family. I came home on the pass. We didn't have much. I mean, it was just like, I didn't even have cable at the house because I wasn't staying there. Didn't have any food because I realized Kyle hadn't really been eating a whole lot. And he told me he was going to go get some groceries and make a meal for us for Christmas. So December 22nd to December 24th, I sat at that house with no phone, no food, no nothing, just waiting for him to come back and hoping for the best. I went to my visit. It was super, super cold. I walked to my visit about a mile away. I had a wonderful visit with my son. I came back to the house and I just bawled. I cried. I was angry. I was going through every emotion, and I locked up the house. Treatment picked me up. I locked up the house. I called the police and said, if anyone comes, please arrest them. It's trespassing. I completed treatment at Liberalis. I actually ended up doing, instead of 90 days, I did a 120-day program. Yes, it was, I have my precious medals, and so I completed Liberalis. I came back to Brainerd. I got into the outpatient program. I was really doing recovery and feeling good about it. And seeing my son working on reunification with hopes that Zachary would also fall into that. But I kind of focused mostly on Dane because he's the one who had the child protection case, and I didn't want them to bring Zachary into the child protection case. So I was working really hard on reunification with Dane, and then would, go and talk with Dustin's parents about getting Zachary back. Dustin had been in and out of jail just like I had. So his parents were the ones that were raising Zachary. I was doing very well. I got a job at the workforce center. I went to apply to get assistance to work, to help get a job, and they hired me on the spot to work at the workforce center. So I was meeting with 11 professionals a week. I was very busy. It was like a full-time job with my child protection case, and I got 1 hour visit once a week with my son. And I would look forward to that hour, and I would, make sure it was on, like, I wouldn't miss it. I never missed a visit. I did every hair follicle test. I think like by the time my child protection case was over, I had like little spots all over that were just stick up from all the hair follicle tests. I was doing very, very well, and Kyle came over with his mother to get a few of his things and was talking with me. And, he had been sober. He looked good. He was a cook at one of the local restaurants, asked if we could sit down and talk to figure out what the plan was. He wanted to help parent, what he needed to do for the child protection case. And I let Kyle back in my life. Kyle was doing well, like he said, and Kyle and I ended up getting pregnant while I had my child protection case. So this is baby number 3. And when I told social services, they were not excited. They're disappointed, which I understood, but they told me that I was going to be able to parent the baby that I was pregnant with, and the goal was reunification with my son. By the time I had my daughter, I had like 16 months sober. So it was a long child protection case. They just, but I felt like social services was supporting me in my recovery journey. And then I met Kimberly, who is my mentor, sponsor, my everything. She's like an earth angel. So you talk about higher powers and believing and divine intervention. She was it. She was asked to work with me from the county because I needed some support, and Kimberly ran a single mother's parenting group. And I needed a sponsor, and they thought maybe Kimberly would be willing to sponsor. So I met her, and I found out she was just an alcoholic. And being that I was an addict, I didn't think that we would get along too well because, my suffering was a whole lot worse than hers. And Kimberly walked into a room, and she was so confident and beautiful, and she's just amazing. And I was intimidated by her. But Kimberly came into my life, and she is the person that started to create this authentic person and help me find this authentic person. And so when she came into my life, Kyle was out of the picture again. I was a month due to have my daughter that I was pregnant with. And we were sitting at a table. It was a round table at the courthouse. It was my lawyer, the prosecuting attorney, child protection, guardian ad litem, therapist, everyone around this table. And I would sit like this with my head down, and they would talk. And they would talk like I wasn't there. Like, well, Charly said she's working. Charly said that, she has time off when the baby's due. Charly said this. No one ever directly had contact with me. They would just talk like I wasn't there. Kimberly came in, and she slapped her hands as hard as she could on the table, and everybody kind of startled. And she said, "You know what the problem is right here?" And they're like, "No." And they go, Kimberly said, "Everyone forgot to tell Charly how magnificent she is." I hadn't heard that. I mean, I knew I was loved as a kid. No one ever took and said, "Charly, you are magnificent." I heard a lot of other names that went with Charly. but magnificent wasn't one. And so that day, I kind of like looked around to see how people reacted, and they kind of all like sat up a little bit, and I sat up a little bit taller, and I thought, I don't know, maybe there's some truth to this.
I'm going to say something a little bit here. I've been friends with Kimberly for about 10 years. And when she first walked in the room, I felt her spirit too, you know, so totally get that part, you know. It's like my heart really appreciated her, and you can just feel the spirit, the sunshine, the sunlight of the spirit in this woman, and her kind and generosity. And but you know, when you said she slammed her hands down on the table and the like, you know, my first PO as an adult, I was 18 years old, and by then I already had a pretty magnificent attitude, you know, and I was kind of a late bloomer. I didn't become an alcoholic until I was 14, so you're a little bit ahead of me on that one, but you know, and but you know, I had every smart aleck answer ready and cataloged in my head for whatever she said to try and run my life, right? And because I figured they're all worthless. I'm just a piece of paper to them. I'm just a file, and I'm not real. And that was the experience that I had by and large. You know, it's how I felt, at least. Doesn't mean it's true, but it's certainly how I felt. And I think there were exceptions, but I had a hard time seeing them. And I think I ran into more negativity than positivity. But some of that was on me too, though, you know. And but my PO, she came into the office area. I was sitting in the lobby, and she walked up to the receptionist, and they said something I couldn't quite hear. And then the receptionist kind of tilted her head toward me, and then, you know, and she handed her a file, and she opened a file, and she glanced at me for a second, you know, and then she came out to the lobby, and I assumed it was to introduce herself and to make sure to tell me how to live my life, and if I didn't, I'm going to get locked up and whatever else. But she shocked me. She did something like Kimberly did with you, but it was a little different. She looked at me and she said, "So Timothy, tell me something good about yourself." And my jaw, Charlie, literally dropped open. I had nothing, you know, and she could have hit me over the head with a hammer, and had less effect, you know, and I struggled with words to find anything to answer that question. Tell me something good about yourself, and I came up with nothing, zero, you know, and that didn't wake me up, but you know, as far as make me get sober or anything, I was 18 then, and I sobered up at 33. So yeah, it took a minute, you know. But it's like in recovery now, we look back and we have these beautiful moments that we can share with other people, you know. So I think that's key, is we find out just who we are, you know, and it's who we are is deeper than all the stuff that has happened to us, you know, and we can't screw that part of ourselves up. That's impossible, and neither can anyone else. But, you know, sometimes we got to get the wreckage of our past out of the way to find out who that is, you know. And I think that was, you know, maybe an unstoppable woman moment for you, you know, to find out who you are. And you are a good mom. You are a good woman. You are a good human being. You're, you know, but how do you have to unearth that from that point forward? What did that look like?
So Kim just started modeling things to me, you know, like you said, you know, Kimberly, she has this presence, and I wanted to be Kimberly. I wanted to be Kimberly so bad. And she would say, oh, you don't make a very good Kimberly. And I would get so upset, like, but I'm trying so hard. And so Kim, she stuck with me. Like, I wish I could say I got the second, I met her and I stayed sober and everything was great. It's not where my recovery story starts yet. So I met Kimberly. She had this mother's group. She would have us, these women that were, most people had child protection cases or passed or really close to having a child protection case. And Kim, first time we went, she said, who has car insurance? And it was like, none of us. And so she did it in the most gentle way, but she would, and each time we'd come back, she would ask like questions. And one time one of us had car insurance, and it was the little wins. It wasn't like, Kim could find positive in anything. And only thing she required was honesty, even though it sucked. Like when she would say, like, do you think I fell off a turnip truck? And it was like, why were you on a turnip truck, Kimberly? And, and so Kim just invested, and she seemed, I believe, and I know she seemed this Charly. And like you said, how did it happen? She helped me go back to school to get my GED. And she has this program called Meta 5 Resiliency Program. So Meta 5 Displaced Homemaker Resiliency Program is so much more than that. It is a program of absolute wellness. It's unconditional love. I knew I was loved from my parents, but Kimberly showed me true unconditional love, and she didn't have to. I didn't have to worry, what her intentions were, anything like that. She walked alongside of me. She wouldn't ask me to do anything she wasn't willing to do herself. And so I had this meeting with myself, Kimberly, a state representative that Kimberly brought in to help support us, because I don't want to throw social services under the bus, because I needed a child protection case. I really did. Like I shared, I was found with a needle in my arm. I was very, very sick. My son did not deserve that. He needed something different. I went through my child protection case, and I was being held at times to a higher standard than social services was holding themselves. My social worker at the time was about 2 years older than I was, and she was just coming on fresh out of college, and she wanted to make an example. And she saw me, like, and this is confirmed years later, we've made amends, but she saw me as a poverty, uneducated mother. And so the idea of me parenting was really hard for her to see, when there was this couple that didn't have children, that had a home and education and jobs and security, and could provide more than what she thought I could. And so I was only having 1 hour visits, like I said, for I don't even know how long, since he was just a baby, and he was 16 months now. And so our bond was very limited, because it was an hour a week with a baby from 3 months old till 16 months in a room that had a rocking chair and a Winnie the Pooh blanket and 2 toys. It was hard to parent. And so a week before I had Kaya, my daughter, I started getting 6-hour unsupervised visits at my apartment. And they were going great. I went in to have my daughter here at Essential Health, where I work now. And I was very open with the nurses. My doctor knew of my past addiction. He did extra UAs for documentation to show that when I had the baby, like, they've taken every step, I've taken every step. She's healthy. So I go and I give birth to my daughter, Kaya, on December 17th or December 15th. And she was perfect. She was absolutely perfect. And my mom was there. Kyle's mom was there. Kyle wasn't, because that was part of the agreement. There was a couple other supportive people that were in my circle that were there, Kimberly, and everybody celebrated. I gave birth, I was nursing. It was right before Christmas. It was just really exciting stuff happening. And everybody went home, and I was up at the hospital, and social services came up, and the lady comes, and I just remember her high heels like clicking across the floor. And she said, "Hi, my name's Rhonda Klein. I'm here to take your baby." And I was like confused, and I'm like, "No, we had a wraparound meeting, and they're going to give me an opportunity to parent." And she looked me dead in the face, and she goes, "And so did we when you were in labor, and we decided that we're going to take the baby. There's a hold on the baby." And I remember feeling just so defeated and frustrated and angry. And they were rushing me out of the hospital, telling me like I had to pack up my stuff so I didn't follow the parents with taking Kaya. And they wanted to make sure that I wouldn't know where she went. And I was sitting in the hospital room, and I said to Rhonda, "I don't understand." And she goes, "Well, you could go to a foster home with her." I was like, "Well, okay, but I need to get a breast pump or something. I'm nursing." And she goes, "So you're declining?" And I said, "I'm not declining. I'm just so confused." And then I left the hospital. And I remember the nurse walking me downstairs, and she's like, "I'm really sorry this had to happen." And Charly, Dr. DeLong has everything for court. He has all the documentation. Just have him reach out. We can't give it to you, but you can request it. And I was like, okay. And I went home, and I looked around, and I had the room all set up with Care Bears and everything ready. And I called my WIC nurse, Grace, and her name was very fitting. And I was bawling. And I told her that Kaya was gone, and she thought Kaya died because I was so upset. And she came over. She probably broke all rules. And she sat with me until Kimberly got there. And Kimberly said, "We're going to get through this." And I said, okay. And Monday, so that was a Friday. Monday came. I went and saw the kids. I went to the foster home in Princeton, and I was there for a month. They were really nice. And I was told that I needed to sign my rights over to my son, Dane, with the opportunity to have an opportunity to parent Kaya because of the timelines in the state of Minnesota. And as a parent, how do you choose which kid you want to keep? And so I talked to my mom, I talked to Kimberly, I talked to the social services, I talked to everyone. I was just like, I don't know if I can do this. And Kim told me she would respect whatever decision I made. And I knew that. And so did my mom. But the judge said to me, due to the timelines, I'm going to be very honest that you wouldn't be getting both children. If you take it to trial, you risk losing both of the children. If you agree to sign your rights over to Dane, to the Hollingsworth, then you will have an opportunity to parent Kaya. And so after about 5 days, I agreed. We went to court, and I signed my rights over to my son, and it felt like I was signing the death certificate. And I looked down and I saw Kaya in the car seat, and it was like, I can never, ever do this again. I can never, ever do this again. And I was carrying the car seat, and I was just like, that fight or flight, and I was in flight mode. I wanted out. I was walking up the stairs, and the prosecuting attorney said, Charly, you did a really good job. And it was like, how do you do a good job? I felt like the biggest failure. I go home. The first few days everybody was very present. Social services was very involved. And after about a week, you know, they seen things were going okay. I wasn't using. And I looked around my apartment and this guilt kicked in. And it was like, I can't choose between my children. I can't choose between my children. I don't deserve children. That's what I decided. It was like, I don't deserve to be a parent. And so I called social services and told them that I couldn't parent and that I needed them to pick Kaya up because I was going to go back to using. And that's what I did. My guardian ad litem came over and said, Charly, if you do not come to court to sign your rights over to Kaya, your rights are involuntarily terminated. Any child you have, they'll take from you from the hospital. And I thought, I don't want to have any more children. Are you kidding me? I failed 3 of them. How can I even think of another child? I don't want a relationship with anyone. I just wanted to die. I just didn't know how I was going to do it exactly. And then I got picked up on a warrant. I went to jail again, and I got out of jail, and my car broke down, and there was a gentleman that I met in jail named Brandon that I could not stand in jail. And he offered to help fix my car. And we ended up just spending time together. We were using together. Brandon and I ended up getting involved. But there was something different about Brandon. Even using and sober, he's like the same person, very rare breed. You know, his addict self was still truthful and honest and loyal. My addict self was a thief, cheater, liar. I'd steal your wallet, Tim, and try to help you find it type thing, right? And so we were like totally opposite. And Brandon knew of my past, and he still stuck around, and he would he would take me to the meetings that Kimberly still had, because Kimberly still welcomed me with open arms. And she said to me, Charly, he's the one. I go, I don't think so. I don't think he's the one, Kim. And she would tell me that. And Brandon and I, like I said, we both had, you know, we were used together. And then Brandon came to me about 5 months into the relationship and said, Charly, I want to get sober. I want us to get sober. And I go, you can. Yeah, good for you. That sounds like a great plan for you. And he said, well, no, I thought we would do this together. And I said, are you kidding me? Like, I lost my kids. I had 100 million reasons not to get sober. And he went around the house and he broke the needles and he all of his own stuff and got rid of all the paraphernalia and everything he could. Called the person that we sold for, said, we're not going to do this anymore. And I went in the bathroom, Tim, and I shut the door and I just slowly went down to the ground and I bawled. And I thought, he is not going to take away the one thing that I have keeping me alive. This is my coping skill, and he is not going to take it. And I became very angry and defensive. And I got high because I wanted to do research one more time just to see if it was time. And I ended up using, he's like an older twin. He has about 8 hours longer than I do. He does not let me forget it. And
That's good.
Yeah, and so I did not want to be sober for a pretty long time, but Brandon, like I said, made the decision. He supported me. He helped me. Like, I was very malnutritioned, everything that goes with it. And about 90 days into my recovery, I found out that I was 60 days pregnant. And Brandon, this is his first child. He is ecstatic. He is excited. We were sober. We knew we didn't conceive when we were using. And then all of a sudden, I remembered they're going to take that baby from the hospital. That's what I was told. And they followed through with everything they said. So on that part of it. And so Brandon and I went to social services in Morrison County, Little Falls, where we live, and met with the social worker and said, what can we do? And she goes, there's nothing. I would do backflips down the hall if you got to keep your baby. So I started grabbing out all those child protection case papers and plans and reading through, and Brandon and I sat up and wrote notes and all these different things that were, recommendations, things that needed to be completed. Treatment was one of them. And so I called all the treatments. I called the focus unit trying to get into inpatient because that was a requirement. And focus could not take me for inpatient because I had been sober at this point, like 120 days, and my insurance wouldn't cover it. So they worked their magic, Deb did, and she got me into outpatient. And I completed my outpatient program at the same place that I work now. And so I did the outpatient program, successfully completed it. Brandon was working, I was in school, I was working. I even took a job at Jiffy Lube, and I am not a Jiffy Lube kind of gal. I have no idea. It was through the workforce center. And Brandon and I just started building and trusting and praying. And Kim was like the glue that just kept us, motivated and knowing that whatever was going to happen, we just had to trust this process. And we ended up, Brandon was helping his grandfather fix up the house that they're putting on the market here in Baxter. And Brandon had just got done getting the house all ready to get on the market with his grandfather and got the phone call that his grandpa passed away. And Brandon's grandmother was not in really good health. And so we ended up moving in with his grandmother to help her. I gave birth on October 16th, 2006. And we knew they were coming to the hospital, meaning like social services was coming to the hospital to take the baby. And Kimberly came to the hospital. There was another woman from social services that came to the hospital. And my mom was there, Brandon's mom, and a police officer came. And Brandon said, just give me a chance. Just give me one chance. And they said, we're sorry, we can't. It's, it's a state law. And so Janine LePage, she called a few other people, which was the prosecuting attorney, and the state of Minnesota decided to give me a chance at parenting. And I've never taken that for granted. And so I've been sober 16 and a half years. Yes, and I know, so I should be an old timer. I feel like it's kind of an old timer at this. I feel old these days.
How many years were you in trouble, do you think?
So 16, I would say 16 to 24. And
so that's 8 years. So you're sober twice as long as you were using.
Yes.
Right? Huh.
Yes, I like that. Yes, nice. I am.
I remember when I was sober 13 and a half years, and I was at a home group called OMD, Outright Mental Defectives. I fit right in. And when I was sober 13 and a half years, I stood up as a big book study group, and I said, look, I know we don't give out medallions for 13 and a half years, but I just thought I wanted to share that today I'm sober 13 and a half years in one day. And I was locked up 13 and a half years, and I'm sober now longer than I was locked up. And I just wanted to say thanks, and of course, we had the laughter and the clapping and stuff, as people always do,
Yeah.
And because they love it when they hear a success story. So yeah, you're sober twice as long. That's awesome.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I didn't realize that. Yeah.
I'm not sure where in the continuum in your story you want to take this, but it sounds like we're in solution mode here. You know, you've met Brandon, you guys are sober, you successfully dealt with the state, which is quite a feat, in my opinion. You know, it's like, oh my gosh, you had to have a miracle, you know, and but I've noticed, you know, when we sober up and we do things right, people in the system will actually, you know, go to bat for us and do what is normally impossible, you know, and but what your life look like after that? You know, you got success with the state. Brandon, you guys were going full steam.
Yeah. So the state, like you said, if we're doing the right thing, the right people fall in place. And so people that I once feared were working for me instead of against me. And they were wanting me to be successful with my parenting. Kimberly was always there. Like from the day she entered my life, she hasn't left my side. And Brandon and I wasn't used to a nice guy. I wasn't used to a nice relationship. So often I tried to sabotage that with my 12-year-old, 14-year-old girl fits that would, I just can't do this anymore. You know, so I'd like to say I got sober and things got perfect. I got sober and things got real. Being a parent is tough. You know, we both were, I mean, he graduated high school. I did not at that time. And so very low paid jobs. We were just kind of getting by, figuring things out. But we had each other. And I started learning communication. And I learned that when things get hard, running away isn't always the answer. But sometimes you just gotta to face it and communicate. And I feel it was like, well, that makes me sound weak. But I realized how healthy it was. And I'm still learning, you know, still after being with Brandon for all these years, almost 17 years, I'm still growing. We're always growing. We don't graduate. And so Kim started helping. She took me to work with her every day for about 5 years. And I was a peer mentor. Yep. I worked at the college. I went to college. Kimberly's program helped me get my GED. And then I went and worked with the women. I got to go to women's retreats. I got to go to the mountain in Arkansas. She took me places that I would have never seen.
What is the mountain in Arkansas? What is that? Is that the Crystal Caves and all that, or what?
Yeah, well, there's this Mayan woman named Magdala Ramirez.
Magdala? Yeah, I've been to Kiva.
Yes, yes. And so I went there 3 times. I've been there 3 times, but the first time I went, Kimberly took me and a couple other participants of the program, and we go up there, and it's the most amazing place. And so we're in the Kiva, and frogs are jumping on me. And I'm like, does anyone else have frogs jumping on them? No. Mm-mm. I was like, okay, what do frogs mean? Fertility. I'm like, okay, like I'm on birth control, so I have nothing to worry about. So we're going up the mountain. It's hot, sweaty. And this is a place, like I was told it was moon dance, not quite the moon dance I was thinking. So when you hear moon dance, you think of just like a good time, relaxing, partying. I knew it wasn't going to exactly be that, but there's a lot of work that went into it. And I'm walking up the mountain, and these frogs are like following me. And I'm looking like, no one else has frogs. No, nobody does, sweetheart. So we get up there, we're dancing. There's this sacred space that's been made. All the women we're all working on ourselves. And talk about, I knew there was a higher power, Tim. I always knew there was a higher power. But that's the first time I've seen it. And the women up there felt it. I was dancing and I became very upset. All this stuff, I was like just pissed off, didn't want to be there. feeling sorry for myself, all these things. And so Magdala takes me down and we sit in the sweat at the kiva, and we sit there, and she says, she puts this stuff around and she's talking with me, and all of a sudden there's this huge presence. And I'm like, and she said, "Are you scared?" And I'm like, "I don't think so." And I'm bawling, I'm crying, I'm confessing everything I ever did. I'm saying what a horrible parent I am. I don't deserve to parent. There's all this like stuff still coming up. And after that, we walk back up the mountain and the women are just smiling. They're all just dancing and smiling. And I'm like, okay. And I was told later, when all that took place with me, they felt it just this. I mean, it was like this moment that I couldn't even explain. And it was like growth took place. And we get back to Minnesota and I find out I'm pregnant again. And Brandon said, "What did they do to you on that mountain?" But it was like, it was different. Like this time, nobody was going to, swoop in. I didn't have to have that fear of somebody taking the baby from me. And it was a pregnancy that I really enjoyed. And having a partner, like with Dylan, I enjoyed the pregnancy, but it was so many unknowns. With Jocelyn, it was like, we got to have a gender reveal. I had a baby shower. I had security. It was like, we own our home. I mean, so many things were different.
This sounds like a real success story now. When there's a lot of power in the impossible, and sometimes I think impossible is God's favorite word, is how I heard it once, and I don't know why this is coming up to mind right now. I know there's probably listeners that have not been through some of the things that we've been through, right? So, and I remember in early recovery, people would be in a meeting, and I understand the feeling of what they would say, but it made sense. But yet at the same time, I had a little problem with it. They'd say, "I am so glad I never drove under the influence and killed someone. I could have easily killed someone," and that sounds like a really laudable sort of a statement and just a simple statement of gratitude. But when I heard it, I thought, what do you think? You're better than me? Do you think you're different than me or something? And it made me think. It's like, okay, our story on the outside, all of our stories look different. I came to this conclusion just over that idea of they're grateful for not driving drunk and killing someone. And I don't know if you know my story at all, but I did. And I ran over a child in a stroller and hit his mom, and the child died. And since I sobered up, it never happened again. Obviously, you can't drive drunk if you're sober,
Right.
But I realized the amount of pain that people feel in their lives. I mean, it was just the conclusion I came to is identical. That pain is the same. And some of us, it takes a lot of pain, to get to the point of being powerless over alcohol or a drug, and other people, it's just like they get a little nudge, and a little nudge from the judge, and they go, "I'll never do that again." It's like, what is wrong with these people? But we get to the same amount of pain, is my theory. It's like what happened to them, they got to that point, and it took me longer, whatever, but I'm not sure where to go with that, but I just feel like on the outside, it's all different. On the inside, it's identical. And, remember when I said there's that part of us that no one can screw up? We can't even screw it up ourselves. Thank God for that. you know, because if I could screw up the inside of who I am, I'd have done it a long time ago. I'm an expert in self-sabotage, you know, so, you know, I think we're singing the same song there, you know, so, and, but seeing pain as beauty takes a lot of work, you know, and until we really love our grief, because really grief is just love in disguise. And until we can fall in love with everything that has happened to us, because it beautifies us, our pain beautifies us. It doesn't feel lovely. It doesn't necessarily, I mean, you know, it's like you're crying and you got mascara running down your face and you're snotting on yourself, you know. It might not look pretty to the average person, but to us in the rooms, those are beautiful moments. And pain is beautiful. It's like tears are holy water to us, and we don't judge it and we don't shoot our wounded, you know. And that's such a beautiful thing about us, is that we just love each other, and that unconditional love you talked about, like with Kimberly, you know. And who couldn't love Kimberly, you know? And who couldn't love you? Who couldn't love me? You know, we are the blocks to the reception of love. It's like, go where the love is. And just because we go where the love is doesn't mean that we can let it in, you know? So it does take a while. But at some point, right, you've given birth to these children. How many children now? I mean,
7.
Okay.
I have 7, ages 21 to age 3.
And their names are, again, I think you mentioned only 6 of them. I think I could have lost.
I did. Nope, okay. I mentioned 6.
Okay.
So Zachary's my oldest. Dane, his birth name was Damien, but it's changed to Dame. Kaya is Lauren.
Damien's name came into my spirit mind as you were talking, and you never said his name. I was going, what is Damien? It makes no sense. Why did that come into mind? But for whatever that's worth. Okay, so yeah, go ahead.
Yep. And so I have Zachary, Dane, Kaya, which shall always be Kaya. I have Jocelyn, Journey, who was going to be my last baby. And then I have, I missed Dylan. I lied to you. So I have Zachary, Dane, Kaya, Jocelyn, Dylan, Jocelyn, Journey, and Liam. Okay. Dylan is our son that, when, like I said, he was kind of that miracle. They're all miracles, but
the miracle baby, yeah.
Dylan was the one that changed us in a different way. And like, for the first time of real parenting was with Dylan.
Mm-hmm. All the babies came from heaven into your life, you know, and they manifested in different ways and times. You know, it's like my mom gave me away when I was young because she was pretty wild and she couldn't handle us. And, you know, it wasn't the prettiest story ever. They had written it in my files that our case of abuse was the worst they'd seen in the state of Minnesota up until that time. And I'm kind of old, so, you know, you know, so, but she ended up giving us into foster care. And while the foster care looked really pretty on the outside, it was ugly on the inside. And I considered it much worse, but she used to tie us in cribs, and she would tear strips of sheets off and tie my wrists to the crib and then my legs to the crib and try to leave me there for 2 or 3 days while she was out partying or doing whatever. And I'm not judging that, by the way. It's just what happened.
Right.
And I was, I don't regret my past or wish to shut the door on it, you know, and everything that has happened in my life makes me who I am today. And to not love the entirety of my life would be a mistake, you know. And I'm not saying it was easy, but I chose to love it. I would rather love life than be mad at it. It's like, you know, resentments are the number one offender that send people back to the needle and the bottle. And I try as I might, I could never find God in the bottom of a bottle or rolled up in a joint. I just you know, it came pretty close a few times, I thought. You know, it felt pretty darn good. And if it didn't, I would have never did it. But, you know, I'd go to church, I'd smoke a joint and go to church. And, you know, that's kind of awesome, right? You know, so, but what I didn't realize, I could feel better straight than I ever did feeling high. You know, it's just like the spirit can lift us higher than anything we can do on this earth. Spirit can lift us higher, and we just got to quit being obstacles in our own lives, you know. So what's I'd like a little detail. I feel like maybe you should share something on your last child. And how's, you said she's 3?
Yep, Liam.
Liam. I thought Liam
Yep.
was a female name. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
And he's 3. So what's the integrity of your relationship with your children now? And, you know, I remember you said in another interview about feeling kind of old because the children teach parents how to be parents. They don't learn that anywhere else, right? You know, so.
Right. So with Liam, so we had Journey. Journey was our one child that we really sat down and planned. And Brandon and I thought, well, one more would complete the family. And so I named her because Journey, to me, it was like, it just was perfect. I spelt it a little bit different. She was the journey. She was the end of our journey in that child part. And we could, you know, well, then 2 years later, almost to the day, we gave birth to Liam Niesen, because our last name is Niesen, spelled different than the actor, but still my husband said, if it's a boy, we're naming him Liam Niesen. And so we had Liam, and we realized we weren't, you know, 24 anymore, that he keeps us on our toes. His energy is just busy, loves fishing, anything to do with fish. I have to beg him to watch cartoons. Like, can we just watch a real cartoon? I want fishing. And so he completes our family. Like, God had a plan. I just didn't understand it with all of my children. And with parenting, it was never that I didn't love my children. I didn't love myself. And so once I was able to figure out self-love, I felt then that I could parent the way my children needed. And it's still a process. You know, there's no perfect parenting. There's times where it's like, okay, I need a timeout. There's different things, but my children, every single one of them, I love them so much. And the 4 that I've been raising, it's like all of them different personalities, so different. And I look at our 15-year-old Brandon and I, you know, and we're like, at 15, we were doing this, and he, you know, Dylan's sitting playing video games. We're like, we should be thankful for this. And so parenting, there's no instructions with it, but I'll tell you, I'm very grateful that I got to parent the 4 children I do, and I'm ready when my other 3 children are ready to be in my life. My oldest son, Zachary, part of the story that I didn't, there's just so much to it, you know, with a story, it's like, it's almost like an onion. We'll peel back layers because there's a lot of losses that took place during my story. Zachary's dad, Dustin, was murdered. He'd gotten out of prison, and he was murdered in Little Falls by his prison roommate. He showed up, a man from Hutchinson showed up, and I don't know all the details because Dustin and I weren't on good terms, but Dustin was killed, and then the trailer house was lit on fire. And Zachary was very angry because his grandparents had raised him, you know, at this point. And even though
what year was that?
So I'm trying to remember. I want to say
about
12.
Okay.
There was a man named Jason Dominguez that killed Dustin Brown in Little Falls, Morrison County. And Dustin and I never made amends. There's a lot of things that happen, a lot of frustration. There's more than just him getting me into using, things I witnessed that I never, I don't know, found peace with that. And so when he passed away, I had a lot of guilt. Zachary, I didn't want to just take him from his grandparents because that's everything he knew. And so I've been the mom that has watched him from a distance. But in the last 2 years, he's been coming over. He came over the other day. He got in contact with his other siblings, the two that were adopted together. And I'm ready when my kids are. I wanted them, my goal when I got sober was they would read my success story one day, not my obituary. And so that's every day I do the best I can.
That's a good segue to the book, by the way. I think that they would be able to read your story someday, you know, and
yeah.
Here's the book that you're in, Becoming an Unstoppable Woman, Entrepreneur, 26 Powerhouse, Industry Leading Women. And I'll see if I can, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to show the picture of it here. I'll try. Yeah, it's not really large, but I will be putting links in the video when the time comes. I'm going to process the recording. But where can people secure your book?
So they can get it on Amazon. They can get it at Walgreens, and I believe it's in Target, but Walmart for sure. Otherwise, if people want to reach out to me on Facebook, I would be happy to send them a signed copy.
Okay, it's just like you must be psychic or something, because every time I'm thinking about asking you a question during this whole thing, it's like you answer it while I'm thinking of it. It's like, well, I don't even have to ask any questions here. So that's cool, and I'll make sure to put those links there too. Yeah, you said before we started the interview that you're an open book and transparent, and that's certainly the case. Where can people find you on Facebook? Do you remember your, like mine is Cameron Communications with a Z?
Don't. So I don't. So like when I just have like regular Facebook and I will add anybody, but
okay.
Social
well,
media.
You added me, so there's the proof.
but like I'm not good with social media. I go on Facebook and things like that because everyone is just, I don't have like a separate page. My goal eventually is to do something like that. I just haven't quite gotten there yet.
You'll get there. You know, well, if God's willing, that whole thing. But, you know, I'm really happy that you've got so many wonderful things secured in your life. And how did you get hooked up with these women in this book?
So my friend Jamie, who lives in Brainerd here, she met this woman named Hannah Olivias. And Hannah has a rare blood disease and was in the People's Magazine. And Jamie and Hannah developed this friendship, and just Hannah had this goal of empowering women, because I'm sure when she first found out that she had this terminal blood disease that she didn't feel very powerful. And, you know, and so then she started, her and her daughter, Adriana, started you know, coming up with a plan. What does this look like? Unstoppable Women. And they started creating this movement for women. And really, I think it's for, it says women, but also it's just to empower anyone who knows what it's like to struggle. And talk about entrepreneur, I didn't quite fit the book. And so when it first came to me and Jamie said, you know, Hannah heard your story. She would like to get in contact with you. What are your thoughts? And I was like, okay. And then I met with her and I was like, I don't fit into this category of these, you know, successful business owners. But then
Sorry.
Then I realized I'm a lifestyle entrepreneur and that I'm developing and creating. And, you know, I have a 5-year plan. I want to, obviously, child protection was a big piece of my story. And my 5-year plan is to start a place where parents can stay with their children, as long as there wasn't like sexual abuse or physical abuse. And if it was addiction, that they wouldn't have to be separated, that they could all work and grow together. So like a sober house, but for families and their children as well. And
cool. In the Brainerd area?
That's my hopes. That's my hopes, is that we start a movement in that and just really make it something so that it's not this. Obviously, child protection cases are needed. There's no easy child protection case, but if there's a way that we can teach the skills, cooking, cleaning, these things that people just automatically assume you might not. And so to be, they would give me this list, Tim, that would say all these things I had to do to be a parent. And it was like, I could do 2 out of the 15, but I was too embarrassed to say it.
Got it. I started Phoenix 490, and I think I had mentioned it to you a little bit, and I had hoped at some point, if we're doing workshops or something, you could step in as a speaker from time to time and try to help people that are, maybe we'll end up talking to some women at Shakopee prison or something. And
I would love that.
Yeah, I've been to the prison 2 or 3 times through the years to speak to the prison population. And they kind of looked at me, well, what's this guy doing here? Talking to us, we're women. And, I saw people looking kind of down at their feet. They got to be there sort of a look. And some others were respectful and looking and listening. But when I mentioned that my mom was a prostitute, then suddenly they looked up.
Yeah.
I got their attention,
They could relate to something. And that's
right.
Like, whether it's addiction, mental health, hardships, like we know, every person knows what it's like to struggle in some way. And connection is recovery. That's what creates recovery, is finding that connection. And so my role as a peer recovery specialist, I could be a doctor. Okay, say I was a doctor, people would come in, I would not get the same response that I do as a peer, because I didn't read it out of a book. I lived it and I get it. However, by the grace of God, was able to take, like you said, those hardships, build on it, and create something different. And I have an office. That the same place that I left, exactly the same place that I once left, empty-armed from having a brand new baby, escorted from the hospital. At the hospital I now work at. And the nurse that was there, she works just down the hall from me. And she doesn't ever say, she would never say, hey, Charly, I remember your story. But she sees me and her eyes light up and she smiles with her eyes. And it's like, thank you.
Yes, you are a miracle story, my friend. God bless you and Brandon and your children and all the people that you get a chance to help, And out of all the near-death experiences I've read and listened to in life, I think what we're here for, if I've learned anything from them, is to love each other unconditionally, and that's all that matters. And I think if you get to where you're going someday, I'll probably get there before you because I'm older, but I'm not in a hurry, But very often I hear people say that, that light, that love, that personage, whoever it is that they meet, just asked who they loved. Did you love? That's what really matters. And some people have this particular experience, some don't. But oftentimes people will see their whole life flash before them in a very short period of time, and they will feel the pain of every person that they brought pain in their life, but they'll also feel the joy that they brought into people's lives, And, my superpower is not committing suicide, And step 3, turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand God. And when I wanted to commit suicide during the darkest part of my sobriety, this is during sobriety, I didn't do it partly because of step 3. My life didn't belong to me anymore. It belonged to my higher power. So I asked God, I said, well, will you kill me then? Right. So my superpower is staying here. But I'm not trying to put words in your mouth here, but kind of like you, I think part of the reason I prevailed is so I could help someone else out. It's like if I would have gave up, right? If I had quit mad because I wanted to commit suicide, if I'd have done it, I realized that I wouldn't be here for someone else when they need it. If you would have gave up, Charly, all the people you're helping now, they would have never got to meet you. And sometimes we have to go through this stuff so we can be of maximum service to those we would help. And so those are the two things that kept me alive. Step 3, and knowing that if I didn't go through it, I couldn't be there for someone who might need me when the time came. And just one little story about that. I had put the words on a marquee in a gas station I used to work at. I was a manager, and the owners allowed me to do it. The owners were faith-based people, and I put up on the marquee, God allows U-turns. And just with the letter U-turns, because there wasn't room to put everything else, I think. But it was also in line with a saying that was going around then from, there was some business that was selling like bumper stickers that says God allows U-turns. And they had keychains and other things. Well, I bought a keychain, and I think I bought a bumper sticker, but I didn't put it on the car. I think I just had it displaying somewhere. And yeah, I did. I had it displayed on this, whatever. I'm making that part of the story more important than what it is. And well, people were complaining about the marquee, right? It's like, oh, take that stuff down. We don't want to see your God stuff on the marquee. We're here to buy gas, And who are you anyway to be putting that up there? It's offensive, you'd get some of that. But then you'd have people would say, yeah, we like that, So, but after about a week and a half, the owner says, we're getting too many complaints. We better take that down. I said, okay. So I took it down and put up, that we're selling gas, instead, and, but within a month I was at Maplewood, Alano. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's just a Twin Cities, one of the meetings, and they call it MAC, Maplewood Alano Club. And I sat down for a Friday morning 10 a.m. meeting, and it was a well-attended group. And I set down my keys on the table, and I had that little label, or I mean, not label, keychain. It was gold and black script, said God allows U-turns. And I just said it without thinking about it. I just set it on the table. And there was a guy sitting across from me, and he did a double take, and he looked at it. And he says, I've seen that before. I saw that. So I saw it on a marquee at a gas station. I said, yeah, I put that up there, and he said, oh, I got a story about that. He says, I saw what was on the marquee. And that was a day I was planning to commit suicide, and I was trying to figure out how to do it. Literally planning to kill myself that day. And I saw the marquee, and I changed my mind. I thought, I think I'm going to try to get sober instead. And here I run into the guy in the meeting after I took the marquee down, right? So this is about our not giving up, because if I would have thought, I thought I killed somebody's child. I thought I was a piece of what. And I'm a baby killer, I didn't mean to do it, but I also didn't mean not to, And we don't mean to do the things that we do, but addiction, we'll throw our lives under the bus in a heartbeat, And so we're like resurrection people or something here, and we got Easter coming up. So I'll make sure this goes up before Easter. Maybe I'll post it on Easter Day itself, just on purpose,
Right.
So what do you think your superpower is?
Well, how you said, like, I could read minds or like feel things, like when I'm well and taking care of myself and really, chakras are aligned and doing my work and working my 12 steps, my superpower is connection, like connecting, relating, and just actively listening.
And you're good at that, and I think you're proof that in recovery, we get our innocence back. It's like we can really get our innocence back. And a lot of people never guess that. They would never know that they can get their innocence back. And, you come across as like, I'm not being a Jesus freak here or something, but he said, be ye as little children, for such is the kingdom of heaven, and I like to, that's like my goal, to be gentle like a child and to see everything innocently. And it's like, no matter what you do to me, I'm still going to love you, because I'm a loving person, and we get our innocence back, but we also become unstoppable in a way, because we've secured a power that is so beautiful and so loving, that with that power, it's just what can happen to us. We can't go off our spiritual path, you know, and we can see it. Not that I'm saying we can't relapse. It can happen to anybody. It happens to people and they die, but we're still on our spiritual path. And our spirit will let our body die before our spirit dies, you know. And but there's a power that if we just lay into that power and lean on that power's understanding, it's just miracles happen one after another, and they just keep going, you know. And if anyone is watching this show, and I trust that exactly the right person is seeing the marquee that we've got up here, because everyone's got a marquee, you know. And what's your marquee? You're seeing the proof is that if you just don't give up and you just keep doing the best that you can do, and it's like my sponsor said, just be the best person you can be and leave the outcome up to God, you know, and help somebody. You know, every gift that we have in our lives is because we've tried to help someone else out, you know, and those things, it's a beautiful life. It really is, you know. Any closing words for the end of the show?
I'm trying to think. I'm a quote person. And so like my whole office, I wish you could see all the different quotes, but one of the ones that I remember the most is I was told all the time, you're so busy doubting yourself while so many are intimidated by your potential. And it took me a long time to understand what that meant. But now it's like I understand, like this Charly was always there, but I was so focused on not, you know, watching everyone else's bobber but my own. And once I finally watched my own bobber, that's when the magic started taking place. That's when the promises started to come true. And I couldn't save everyone. When I first got sober, I thought, you know, I had this magic cape and I could go around and fix you and you and you. And my head was like this and this and this. And I want to tell everyone all the great things that I've done and it could fix the world. And I had to hang up that cape and the world still went on. And I realized the best gift that you or I or anyone in recovery can give is just being the best version of ourselves and modeling what we want for them. And that's what Kimberly taught me. It's like she modeled to me what I wanted. I wanted to be Kimberly so bad. Today, I love Kimberly. She's still just as amazing, but I want to be Charly. It took a lot to get there.
Amen, sister. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap her up. I want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in to the Incomplete Skeptic Sober Wise Guy series. I'll be welcoming you back for my next guest, which I'm not sure who this next one is going to be. Actually, there's two people that are looking at a couple of dates, but we're going to be back, and we're going to be back trying to help people be unmarginalized. We want to give voice to the voiceless, and to express unconditional love, and to give people a fist bump of positivity, you know. So pass on the love. And remember, if you don't tell at least 3 people a day that you love them, you've probably wasted a day of your life. Don't do that. Go out and love someone, especially the ones that are hard. Find one person a day that you don't want to say it to and do it anyway. Be tough. That's real strength, man. Peace out, everybody.